Days had passed since the awful night at Wyan's house. They went in and found Wyan's grandmother brutally stabbed, blood covering the floor, and where the killer had tried to chase Wyan. After they looked around the scene, they placed her grandmother's body in a bag and sent it off to the morgues for preparations for her funeral. While this was taking place, Wyan was placed in a temporary foster home until they found out what they would do with her. The day of her grandmother's funeral came and Wyan wasn't ready. Her foster mother walked into Wyan's room and saw she was dressed, but she was curled up in the corner, hugging her knees. Her long hair covered her face in clumps all around. The foster mother walked over and knelt down beside her and asked softly, "What is the matter, hon?" Wyan looked up at the foster mother with crystal tears falling down her pale cheeks, asking, "Please tell me this is just a dream. I don't want to be alone now." The foster mother felt tears in her eyes at Wyan's question. She wrapped her arms around Wyan and said, "No, this is not a dream, but I will help you in any way that I can, honey. But it's time to go. Are you ready?" Wyan nodded her head slowly and stood up, slowly grabbing her foster mother's hands for comfort. They walked out of their house and to the hearse outside. Wyan shrugged her head slowly, looking down at the ground as she walked. She slid into the car, sitting next to the cold window. Her foster mother and father slid into the car as well. Everyone buckled up and they slowly drove off to the cemetery. Wyan did not speak the whole time. She just stared out the window and up into the gray, cloudy sky. When they arrived, a small group had already formed under the small tent over the grave. Wyan looked and saw people she knew. Some she didn't recognize. She walked slowly over to the grave and looked at the beautiful silver coffin that was being held above the grave. She gently placed her hand on the casket and felt tears dripping from her eyes. She turned around slowly and looked at everyone who showed up and said, with tears filling her eyes and onto the ground, "Thank you all for coming for my Nana. I know now that she is smiling down on all of us." Wyan forced a smile through her tears as everyone bowed their heads, praying. Wyan didn't bow her head. She had thought, if there was a God, why would he ever let this happen to a little girl? Wyan turned her head to everyone and watched as the casket was slowly lowered. As she watched, she saw all the memories of her grandmother in front of her eyes. The tears poured from her eyes, and she collapsed to her knees. The only family she had was now gone. Her foster parents walked over to her slowly and handed her something. She turned, and what she saw, it just made the pain worse. It was her grandmother's opal necklace. She always wore it. She took it from their hands and slowly slid it over her head. She looked up at them and gave them a soft smile through her tears, saying softly, "Thank you. This means everything to me." Time skipped 3 years. Wyan is now 16. Nothing really had changed about her. Except her hair grew longer and her personality changed. She was no longer the bubbly little girl she used to be. Now she was the opposite. Her skin had lost all of its color. She was as pale as snow. Her beautiful eyes that were filled with hope were now filled with sorrow, sadness, and anger. To hide her eyes, she kept her bangs low across her forehead. She stayed away from everyone, but she did have one friend, however. His name was Lowell. Lion's point of view. It was 7:20, and I was running late for the bus this morning. Shit, I exclaimed as I burned my ear with my straightener. I quickly sat it down and yanked the cord out from the wall and dashed to the other side of the house to grab my backpack. Why do I always put you far away? I groaned lazily. I strung it over my back, turning all of the lights in my house out. Grabbing my house key and locking the door, I dashed down my wooden stairs and dropped in my damp grass, covering my shoes in dew and blaze of glass. I didn't care at the moment because my bus was just about to leave without me. I saw Leo poked his head out of the window and hollered, "Hurry up, you're so slow." I smiled and quickly dashed and finally made it. I panted hard as I slowly walked up the back bus stairs to the back where Lowell was laughing. I sneered at him and face-palmed him as I sat down. He grabbed his forehead, explaining what was that for. I smiled and taunted him, saying, "Why didn't you dodge? If it, you slowpoke." He glared at me, but we soon started laughing at each other. The rest of the bus ride went like this, me and Leo taunting each other. But soon the bus driver yelled at us, and we stopped, but quickly giggling behind the seats. When we arrived at the high school, Leo and I groaned and slowly trudged off the bus steps and onto the concrete of the school. I looked at Leo with a blank stare and said, "Ready to walk in the gates of hell?" He acted scared and fell to his knees, saying, "This isn't hell. I have you of a friend. Almighty Lord of the underworld." I kicked him in the thigh and walked off laughing. He groaned when I kicked him, but quickly ran towards me, shoving me with his elbow. I loved him. He was your best friend / brother. I could always count on him, and the same for him. I was walking to the doors, but stopped. Leo turned to me and looked at me with a confused look, asking, "What's the matter, Ryan?" I felt something strange, like someone was watching me. I looked around, but I saw no one. I turned back to Leo and shook my head, smiling. "Don't worry, it's nothing." Leo shrugged and walked inside. I followed behind him, but I still felt eyes watching me.